Welcome to Politics for Patriots. Here's your host, the eviscerator of progressive nonsense, the executioner of imbecility, and the grim reaper of BS, Eddie Zipper.
Democrats are making a last-ditch effort to smear Brett Kavanaugh before he's confirmed by the Senate. And he will be confirmed. He will get at least 54 votes. I promise you that. For a group who loves all of our norms so much, Democrats sure were willing to trash them over and over at Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings. You've heard it called the circus. I would agree, except one big caveat: the circus is fun. This was not fun. But it did have plenty of clowns, though, that is for sure. Senators Harris, Blumenthal, and of course, Cory Booker.
I am Spartacus.
That wasn't really a very fair edit at all. You know, Cory Booker said, "This is my I am Spartacus moment," but I cut out everything except I am Spartacus, so it just sounded like he was saying I am Spartacus. So that wasn't fair of me, but guess what? Democrats don't use fair editing either. Kamala Harris tweeted that Kavanaugh called birth control abortion-inducing drugs. And she posted a video that's edited so that you cannot tell that he's characterizing someone else's view in a court case. And by the way, accurately characterizing that view. She obviously did not care for the part of the video that showed that. When her staff showed her that part, I think she probably said,
No, go past this part. In fact, never play this again.
So this is just a pathetic attempt to smear Kavanaugh. And I'm not going to go into debunking it, because I already did. I mean, all you have to do, go listen to the 5 seconds before Senator Harris's video starts. Boom, debunked. I mean, she really made it easy. Of course, the mainstream media is disinterested in taking the 5 seconds to debunk this because they are all in on the Democrats' agenda. They love it. There aren't going to be any lectures for Senator Harris about unity and bipartisanship and just basically, not being a liar. Those lectures are only for Republicans. And not just any Republicans, they're not for John Kasich. They're for Republicans who misbehave. That special sort of Republican that goes and elects Donald Trump President of the United States. That's who those lectures are for. They are only for Republicans. And a lot of folks don't know this about me, but I actually speak fluent liberalese. So I'm going to share with you some important interpretations of these lectures. Let's return to civility. That means no matter how far left Democrats go, pretend that their ideas are super valid and not at all illogical or crazy. When a Democrat or one of their friendlies in the media, I call them the Democrat irregulars, when a Democrat or a Democrat irregular says, we need more bipartisanship, what that actually means is Republicans need to show up to the negotiating table ready to ball up conservatism and throw it in the trash. When they say respect our norms, that means under no circumstances should you drain the swamp. And that's one of the most reliable motifs of anti-Trump media, is the idea that Trump has taken a wrecking ball to all of our most important norms. That's why we're in so much trouble, because of all the norm wrecking that's going on. I mean, you watch CNN for a day, and you're going to hear the word norm so much, you're going to feel like you're watching an episode of Cheers. Norm! Now, it's important to know that norms are not laws enshrined in the Constitution. Of course they're not. Democrats despise most of those. They would want to get rid of norms if norms were the laws enshrined in the Constitution, right? They think the Constitution is a living, breathing document that changes with the times. It's a hipster constitution that considers progressive whims greater than or equal to a convention of the states. I mean, sure, it's the legally binding law of the land, but, you know, if some pipe-smoking, tweed-wearing, liberal Ivy League professor has a better idea, let's roll with that. I mean, come on, dude went to Harvard. Progressives treat the Constitution like it is a wiki founding document that can be validly updated by any leftist with a keyboard. So norms are not stuff that's in the Constitution. No. But they are living constitutionalist interpretations of the Constitution. I mean, the Second Amendment is so 200 years ago. Toss that out. We don't need a Second Amendment. That was for the before time. That was for long, long ago. Toss that out. Oh, but the part of the Constitution that a gang of 9 decided protects abortion rights? Yeah, very important norm. Okay, that's the last one. I'm not going to play that drop again, I swear. So, what are norms? Norms are the building blocks of the status quo. If D.C. is a swamp, as President Trump likes to call it, norms are simply the swamp sludge. If you are a Washington swamp monster, you know, a big city gator in a suit and tie, a civil servant who doesn't get a huge salary, but that's okay because you would trade the money for the power any day of the week, there are two kinds of norms to you. Ones that are advantageous and ones that you don't give a crap about. See, norms protect your power while it is in someone else's hands. Right? Roe versus Wade, very important norm. Why? Because it protects abortion rights even when Republicans are in office or in Congress or in the president. It protects abortion rights. And so it's a very important norm because it protects them even when the power is out of the Democrats' hands. It's not good enough for Democrats to take the House and Senate and then pass a law protecting abortion rights the way that they want to. No. Because then they're only protected until there's a Republican Congress. So Roe versus Wade has to be a super important norm so that even when Republicans appoint conservative Supreme Court justices, it's protected. So Roe versus Wade, very important norm. Second Amendment, don't need it. So, okay, I see. So Supreme Court cases are norms. Supreme Court cases like D.C. versus Heller. Oh, no, not that one. Roe versus Wade, not D.C. versus Heller. That one needs to be overturned, right? What about the Citizens United case? Is that an important norm? No, that is, no. Now, I'm not saying that all norms are bad. Some norms are fantastic. Take the Supreme Court, for example. It does not say in the Constitution that there shall be 9 Supreme Court justices at all times. Okay, history lesson. Fire up your flux capacitor and let's hop in the Wayback Machine and find out how we ended up with 9 justices on the Supreme Court.
Gentlemen, I'm here to help you with your history report.
I don't know. That was my first try at a sound effect for the Wayback Machine. I'm not sure I like it. It's Rufus from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I don't know. I might have to go with something else. Email me if you have an idea. patriots@eddiezipper.com. I need a great sound effect for the Wayback Machine. But Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, though, is one of the funniest movies of all time. If you've never seen it, you have to see it. It's hilarious. Okay, so how did we end up with 9 justices on the court? We got in the Wayback Machine. You fired up your flux capacitor. Here we go. Starting in 1801, there were 5 justices. Who decided that? If it's not in the Constitution, well, obviously Congress decided it. They passed a law, they said 5 justices, boom, it happened. There were 5 justices. Okay, that's a check that Congress has over the Supreme Court. They get to decide the number of justices. In 1807, they increased the number to 7. Then, 30 years later, they added a couple more and made it 9. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In 1863, when Abe Lincoln was president, they increased it to 10. Hold on, 10? Why don't we have 10 now? Well, in 1866, Congress reduced the number of justices back to 7. Now, that didn't mean they fired 3 justices. It just meant the next 3, as they stepped down, no new justice would be nominated and appointed to replace them until there were 7. Well, why did they do that? Simple. So that Andrew Johnson couldn't appoint any justices. That was the only reason that they did it. And guess what? He didn't appoint any justices. I mean, talk about a Republican Congress sticking it to a Democrat. You know how many presidents appointed 0 Supreme Court justices? 4. All right, the first 2 were both Whigs. William Henry Harrison, who is famous for delivering an 8,000-word inaugural address in the cold and rain, catching pneumonia, and then dying a month into his term. The second one was Zachary Taylor, who died after 16 months in office. Cherries and iced milk allegedly did him in, bacteria from it. So every elected, this is kind of an aside, but every elected Whig president died before serving half a term. If I were a conspiracy theorist, I could spin a tale about that. Especially, the Whigs are trying to deal with the Democrats. All their presidents are dying. I don't know. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so I'm not going to start to speculate in that area. But I digress. This is all pointless. Okay. The third president to appoint 0 justices was, of course, Andrew Johnson. That was because the Republican Congress passed a law to stop him. The fourth was Jimmy Carter. The reason, thanks to some sort of divine intervention, no vacancies came up during his one disastrous term in office. So that's it. Those are the only presidents who didn't appoint any justices to the Supreme Court. The Republican Congress during the Johnson administration also passed an unconstitutional law that made it illegal for him to fire cabinet members and then impeached him when he broke that law. So, Johnson was just the most obstructed president of all time. I'm not upset about it or anything. I don't. But he was the most obstructed president of all time. That Republican Congress they went after him. I honestly think, as hard as everybody is on President Trump and as ruthless as they are going after him, I honestly think that Andrew Johnson had it even worse. All right, so if you think Democrats are in a tizzy about President Obama not getting to appoint Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court because the Senate exercised their constitutional power not to advise and consent. If you have a power to advise and consent, it implies the power not to advise and consent. So just imagine Congress passing a law that ensured Obama couldn't appoint any justices from the beginning of his term, right? No Kagan, no Sotomayor, no Garland. Whew. Then they'd really have something to be upset about. But it was totally constitutional. Now, the law against him firing cabinet members that got him impeached, that was not constitutional. But this law changing the number of members of the Supreme Court, yes, constitutional. So in 1869, Ulysses S. Grant became president, and they raised the number back to 9. It never even got down to 7. It didn't even have time. 3 justices didn't even step down. Speaking of Grant, if you're thinking of reading a book about Grant, forgo the newer ones and read The Man Who Saved the Union by H.W. Brands. Really fantastic, interesting read. All his life, Grant was in the midst of interesting events. He served in the Mexican War, then he was stationed out west during the Gold Rush in 1849. then obviously the Civil War, then the White House. I mean, you could not have a better historical backdrop for a biography than one of Grant. And the good one, the one to read, The Man Who Saved the Union by H.W. Brands. It's fantastic. So I like the 9 Justices norm, and so do a lot of other people. Right? Court packing was the one horrible agenda item that even the much revered, much loved FDR couldn't shove down America's throat. He would have, if he could have, but he couldn't. So there's this mythology about American history that all throughout history, things were super bipartisan and everyone went by all the norms. And then suddenly, in the last year, partisanship just broke out of nowhere and nobody's ever seen it before. That is absurd. American politics have almost never been bipartisan, right? The greatest norm of American politics is all of the norm breaking and all of the political games and all of the exercising as much power as you can. That is the story of American politics. So as long as we're sitting here in the Wayback Machine, let's go all the way back to John Adams. The election of 1800, as I've said on the show lots of times, was one of the nastiest, most fake news elections of all time. One paper printed that John Adams was a hermaphroditic character. All right, one paper, this was a Federalist paper, printed a great big headline, Thomas Jefferson is dead. And that was rough because back then Thomas Jefferson couldn't just get on Twitter and say, no, don't worry about it, I'm not dead. Oh, it's Thomas Jefferson's verified account, he's okay, he's not dead. I mean, he had to go see these people and be, look, I'm not dead, I'm alive. Please print that I am alive and not dead. That was fake news. All right, so Thomas Jefferson is dead. Back then, all the news was partisan, just like it is now. But in their defense, they weren't pretending to be objective. So, John Adams signed a law that nobody could bring the administration into disrepute. That was called the Sedition Act. That act blatantly violated the First Amendment. But judicial review hadn't even been established yet. So there was not really a chance the Supreme Court was going to overturn it unless they used judicial review for the first time ever, which they soon would. But Congressman Matthew Lyon published an anti-Adams editorial, and they tossed him in jail for it. And he proceeded to be reelected from his jail cell. Only member of Congress ever to pull that one off. So Adams lost the election of 1800 to Thomas Jefferson. I won't get into the details because I think I've done that in 2 shows already, because the election of 1800 is one of my favorite stories in all of American history to talk about. But we're not going to talk about it now. You can download the old episodes if you want to hear about it. I hope you can't hear my dog barking behind me. All right, anyway. Most divisive election in American history, election of 1800. It was nasty. I mean, it makes the 2016 election, the Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton election, it makes that look like one of those old episodes of Tom and Jerry, but the ones where Tom and Jerry were friends. You remember those? It was so upsetting when they came on. But why aren't they fighting? Why isn't Tom eating Jerry? This is his big chance. But no. Instead, they were like,
lemonade? Please, I made it just for you. You are my best friend.
That drop is from a classic Simpsons episode where Itchy and Scratchy aren't allowed to fight anymore because Marge got offended, so they have to make episodes where Itchy and Scratchy are friends. And that was what those old Tom and Jerry episodes were like. They were like, lemonade? Please. All right, so what did John Adams do after Thomas Jefferson won that divisive, nasty election? All right, the part you've heard is that he accepted his defeat, handed over the executive position to Jefferson, and became an American hero. And that part is true. I don't want to create the impression that that wasn't a pivotal reason that the Republic survived, because it was. And thank God for John Adams for doing that. He's an American hero for that. But before that, he did something else. During his several months of being a lame duck president, because it wasn't 2 months back then like it is now, I think it was like 4 months. They didn't do the inauguration until March back then. During that 4 months, the lame duck Congress started expanding the courts, and John Adams started appointing as many Federalist judges to those courts as he possibly could. They just wanted to fill up the judiciary with Federalists because they weren't going to be in power anymore in the executive branch or in Congress, so they wanted to fill up the courts with judges that would rule in their favor. Federalist judges. Well, geez, that doesn't seem very bipartisan. But from the very beginning, American politics has been about exercising as much power as you can get away with exercising. You use as much of your power as you can use without losing it. So those midnight justices, or those midnight judges, are the reason for Marbury versus Madison. That's the case that established judicial review. And they teach you in school to be able to say, Marbury versus Madison established judicial review. But they don't tell you about the midnight judges. They don't tell you how shrewd it was of Chief Justice Marshall, a Federalist, to expand the power of the Supreme Court while handing the Jefferson administration and the Democratic Republican Congress a win. But it was shrewd. So Marbury versus Madison contains two major political power grabs, and all you learn in school is that it established judicial review. As if judicial review was this thing that was there all along and Marshall just found it. But that's not how it happened at all. That was an expansion of the court's power. Andrew Jackson destroyed a norm by using the veto power 12 times. The Whigs were beside themselves. This dude thinks he's a king. He's exercising the veto power however he wants. He used it 12 times. 100 years later, FDR used it over 600 times. Norms are a way of stopping your opponent from grabbing power that actually belongs to him. Right? If Andrew Jackson can't use the veto for any reason that he wants, why don't you go ahead and impeach him? No? That's what I thought. The Constitution does not set limits on why the president is allowed to exercise the veto power. So the Whigs could whine and complain about it and write their hashtag Never Jackson articles, but they couldn't actually do anything about it because the norms were just what they saw as ways of protecting their power, even though it was in Jackson's hands at the moment. You know who busted norms? Abraham Lincoln. You know who didn't? Millard Fillmore. You know who did? Andrew Jackson. You know who didn't? John Quincy Adams. You know who did? Ronald Reagan. You know who didn't? George Bush. Which one? Take your pick. Power loves norms because norms are swamp sludge. They are the building blocks of the status quo. Think back to the 2016 midterms. Where did all the big money go? Where was all the power concentrated? Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush. You can't get any swampier than keeping the presidency in the family. Jeb raised $150 million.
Please clap.
Why was that? Was that because he was so inspirational and had such transformative policy ideas? Hell no. It was because he was going to make a great protector of the norms. Oh, but goodness, did he miss the zeitgeist. I mean, in an election where people were sick and tired of the DC status quo like never before, he ran to be the third Bush in the White House in as many decades. I mean, lots of Bushes are great, if your goal is to build a privacy hedge. Lots of bushes are not so great if you are trying to change the status quo in Washington. Jeb Bush was trying so desperately hard to find the political zeitgeist during that campaign. He looked like Mr. Magoo playing a game of pin the tail on the voting block. My favorite Jeb Bush moment was when he tried saying anchor babies. Do you remember that? Jeb Bush said anchor babies. He used the term anchor babies. 1 minute he's all like, illegal immigration is an act of love. And then the next minute he drops the term anchor babies. Then when the media and the Democrats started to come down on him and put political pressure on him because he said anchor babies, then he said that, oh, it's not racist because it's not all Mexicans. In fact, it's mostly Asian people. And then everybody got mad at him for saying that they said that was racist. So, Jeb Bush was like, I think I found a way out of this hole. Just toss down that shovel and I think I can get myself out. What happened to him was people were really responding to Trump's personality and rhetoric, obviously, during that campaign. So Jeb thought he would give it a try, even though it's not his personality. Oh, I gotta hand it to you. Very nice work on that one, Jeb.
Please clap.
So somebody somewhere sure wanted Jeb Bush to be president because he raised more money than anybody. Right? The media was telling us way early on that Jeb was the favorite to win the GOP primary. They told us that for like a year and a half. Oh yes, Jeb is the favorite to win the GOP primary. Everybody sure likes Jeb a lot. So somebody out there wanted him to win. I don't know who it was, but it definitely wasn't the voters. Let's break it down. And I'm pretty sure this statistic doesn't even include super PAC spending. And Bush's right-to-right super PAC spent a boatload. It took in like the GDP of a small country, like $100 million. And Jeb Bush, and I'm pretty sure this is just actual campaign dollars, Jeb Bush spent $126 per vote that he got. He spent $126 per vote. Trump spent $5 per vote. So, nobody anywhere obviously was planning to vote for a third Bush. He got nothing. He got destroyed and then dropped out. Voting for a third Bush has swamp disaster written all over it. If you look back at history of the presidency when it goes to the family member of another president, John Quincy Adams, disaster. Benjamin Harrison, grandson of William Henry Harrison, who was himself grandson of a Declaration signer, disaster. This cartoonist, Joseph Kepler, trolled Benjamin Harrison through his whole presidency. They didn't have Twitter back then, so you had to troll differently. He drew Benjamin Harrison wearing Granddaddy's hat, and it was too big for him. And as Harrison's presidency kept going, the cartoonist kept drawing the hat bigger and bigger until the very end, where Uncle Sam looks in the giant hat and he can't find Benjamin Harrison at all. The caption says, "Where is Ben?" Then, of course, George W. Bush, disaster. Hillary Clinton, disaster averted. Jeb Bush, disaster averted. But look how much money those two raised. American politics are, and always have been, about exercising as much power as you can exercise without losing that power. When someone wants to break a norm, but they don't, it's because they lack the political capital to break it, not because they are superheroes of bipartisanship and civility. Every politician in Washington would break every norm that is disadvantageous to them if they could get away with it. All right, I've gone on too long again. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, Politics for Patriots, and please leave a review if you have time. I would love it. Thank you so much. That's it for today. I'm out of here.
No, go past this part. In fact, never play this again.
You just listened to Politics for Patriots with Eddie Zipper. Email the show at patriots@eddiezipper.com and please subscribe.